This is the State of Things live from the Museum of Natural Sciences in Raleigh, and you can see a live stream of this show by clicking on a link at stateofthings.org. What we're going to be talking about is what happened tens of millions of years ago when humans weren't on this planet, dinosaurs, of course, roaming freely. And while they eventually went extinct, they live on in the imaginations of children, filmmakers, and paleontologists everywhere. The Tyrannosaurus rex, in particular, that giant predator, haunts the dreams of anyone who has seen Jurassic Park. And now researchers may have discovered the king who reigned before T-Rex. Scientists at the Natural Sciences Museum in Raleigh are at the forefront of a new dinosaur discovery. See-atch meekerorum was one of the largest predators ever discovered in North America and discovered only recently. Lindsay Zanno co-discovered see-atch. She is the Director of Paleontology and Geology Research at the museum, and she joins me now. Lindsay, welcome back. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Congratulations. This is very exciting. You've discovered a new dinosaur.
It's very exciting for us. This animal of this size hasn't been discovered in North America in 63 years, and so this is a really special event.
Tell us about see-atch.
See-atch was a colossal megapredator. It was a carnivore that hunted about 98 million years ago in the western part of North America, hunted long-necked dinosaurs and early duck-billed dinosaurs.
And how did you find it? Where you found see-atch in Utah?
We discovered the bones of see-atch in Utah. I was out walking the hills just like paleontologists do. We have no high-tech way of finding dinosaurs. We simply get out there and put our eyes on the ground, and I spotted the bones of see-atch already eroding out of the hillside.
It was sticking up out of the ground.
Yeah, in fact, almost every dinosaur that we find is already being destroyed at the surface of the ground when we find it. And it's a sort of a race to get the bones out of the ground before they're all destroyed.
How much of see-atch was left when you got there?
Not a ton of see-atch has been preserved. There's lots of bones from the spine and tail of this animal, the hip and the leg, but we don't right now have any bones of the skull. We don't have any bones of the forearm.
So how do you know that this is a dinosaur we don't know about already?
Well, for starters, see-atch comes from a gap of about 60 million years, when paleontologists for over half a century have not known who the major predator was roaming around in western North America during this time. So we knew even before we found see-atch that if we could stumble across the bones of one of these dinosaurs, it would be something new. But to demonstrate that, we actually have to go all around the world and compare the bones that we have to all the known bones of similar animals and see if we can distinguish it as something different.
And how do you do that? Is it just visual, or do you do chemical tests? How do you know it's a different bone?
Well, we do visual tests. We do a lot of 3D animation and modeling now to help us compare bones from different animals. But basically, it's the same way we've done paleo for over a century, which is, making those comparative looks at these bones.
And how do you know? And a meat eater, obviously, carnivore predator. How do you know?
Well, we do have some teeth that are referred to this animal, but even without that, just the skeleton alone is enough to tell us. All predatory dinosaurs walked on two legs. They held their body horizontal like birds. They have a very particular look to their skeleton. And
of course, we now know that dinosaurs were probably the predecessors of birds, right? Did he have the? Did see-atch have the predecessor to feathers, do we think?
We think so. So there are some ancestral animals to this group that have been preserved with some evidence of feathers, and so we chose to continue that on in our reconstructions of see-atch. And here I have to go ahead and correct you, Frank, because in the opening you said that dinosaurs are extinct. And it's important that we finally come to terms with this as, we all grew up as kids thinking that dinosaurs were gone. They're sort of relics, they were failures, and we now know that one group of dinosaurs actually survived that mass extinction event that nearly took everybody out at the end of the Cretaceous, and those are, of course, birds. They're very, in a real sense, very living dinosaurs that are hanging around with us today.
And lizards are the offspring? I mean, they are the of dinosaurs. Are they in a lineage, the lizards that we see today, or was there a complete break?
Yeah, no, lizards are a completely separate group of reptiles. So the things that are most closely related to dinosaurs are actually crocodiles, and then birds themselves are the only living member of the dinosaur group.
And we know what he ate. This also was maybe the animal that may have kept T-Rex in check. Is that right?
It's a fascinating story. In the rocks that we find the bones of sea-atch, we find the teeth of tiny tyrannosaurs. And by tiny, I mean the size of a large dog, maybe a Great Dane. These animals were basically like jackals living in an environment with lions. They're kind of just kept in check by animals like sea-atch, kind of roaming around in the shadows. And it wasn't until sea-atch and other dinosaurs like sea-atch went extinct in North America that those little tyrannosaurs were able to evolve into great size and become the great predators that we know and love.
So tell us about the importance of this discovery. What do we know about the evolution of dinosaurs from this discovery?
Well, it's actually related to what we were just talking about, in that we used to think that certain groups of animals outcompeted other groups of animals and drove them to extinction. This happened at the beginning of dinosaurs when crocodiles reigned. It happened after that extinction event when mammals came to power. We used to think of those animals as having some kind of competitive edge. What we're learning is that over and over again in time, it takes the extinction of the group that's occupying that niche in the ecosystem that provides the opportunity for something else to sort of fill that role. And that's a pattern we see again and again through time, and I'm fairly certain, given our modern biodiversity crisis, we're losing all our top predators right now, we're going to see something similar.
What do you think did in sea-atch?
Well, we're not really sure. There was some serious climate change at the time. The planet was becoming hotter. Sea level was rising. Sounds familiar, right? And the major food source for these animals actually went extinct at that time, too. We don't know if climate drove both of those groups to extinction, or if because the prey became extinct, sea-atch would have become extinct also.
When you say that, I mean, we think of these predators as being sort of omnivorous, I mean carnivorous, but they eat any old meat, don't they, or are they particular?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, we don't want to stretch the science too far. What we can do is we can look at the bones of animals and we can look for bite marks that give us conclusive evidence about what sea-atch was eating. We haven't gotten that far in this project yet. This is the first big announcement that we've made. We do have a lot of other dinosaurs and a lot of other science that's going to be coming out. We hope to announce a couple new dinosaurs in the next 3 to 5 years.
Oh, this is great. So what do you do in the meantime? What kind of research do you do on the bones that you have?
Well, we'll keep looking at that question. We have bite marks on these bones. We want to know what kinds of animals scavenge sea-atch, and we're actively researching to discover more about the ecosystem. So every summer, the museum and North Carolina State sends a team out, an expedition to go back to these areas and continue to find new dinosaurs and excavate the ones that we know about.
Is there anything you can tell? I mean, we know sometimes when you excavate a site, for instance, if it's an archaeological dig, you know, we can tell by the seeds that were left in the pots a little bit about the rainfall events and all of that in that period. It sounds to me like a lot of that ecological evidence might have been lost if these bones were right on the surface. Is there much you can tell about the environment at the time this animal lived?
Yeah, there actually is a lot we can tell. We can do studies of the rocks to determine how wet the environment was, what kinds of plants were there. We have plant fossils from here, and we also have a whole variety of what we call microfossils. And these are tiny fossils that help us understand all the other animals that lived in the same ecosystem. So we have fossils of frogs and amphibians and lizards and early mammals and a variety of turtles, some giant turtles with shells over 2 feet long, and a whole bunch of different crocodiles. So we're able to sort of flesh out that whole ecosystem, really get a good handle on it.
You said there are more discoveries yet to come. Do you have a sense of what you're going to find, or is this all going to be a surprise to you?
Well, we have a general sense, but sea-atch was a real surprise to us. It belongs to a group of dinosaurs called neovenatorids, and they've never been discovered on the North American continent before. So we knew we'd find something new, but we weren't expecting to find something that new.
Now, I have to ask you about the name. Sea-atch, not bad, but meekerorum, I mean, meek and predator. That's my problem.
I know, it's no T-Rex of a name, is it? But you know, the Meeker family actually sponsored some of the research early on, and we really like to pay special homage to those people that make the science happen.
And can you tell if there is a genealogy? Did these things simply fall off the face of the earth and go extinct, or was there some version of them that sort of carried on?
Well, these animals are actually known from almost every continent. So this is the story here in North America, that they went extinct and were replaced by tyrannosaurs. It's also probably the same story in Asia, but in South America and Africa and Australia, these animals were the top dog in their ecosystem well into the time when T-Rex ruled. In fact, they got even bigger than T-Rex down in South America. So they were still the top dog on the block down there.
So they were contemporary then at some point. Well, you said they were here. There was just just a tinier T-Rex that they had to deal with in North America.
Correct.
Somehow T-Rex got bigger, and it drove, in other parts of the world, it drove see-atch to compete and get larger. You're suggesting, perhaps.
Well, we're suggesting that see-atch, just by virtue of its large size, kept tyrannosaurs from getting big here, and it wasn't until they really had gone extinct in North America that tyrannosaurs were able to occupy that niche. So maybe if see-atch hadn't ever gone extinct, we never would have seen the evolution of T-Rex.
Oh man, the movie industry would be forever bereft. Congratulations again, Lindsay. So great to talk with you.
Thank you so much, Frank.
Lindsay Zanno, the Director of Paleontology and Geology Research at this museum. And just ahead, we're going to talk to a roundtable about the intersection of science and policy. You can watch this program if you want on the internet. We are live streaming, and if you go to our website, stateofthings.org, you can see a live stream of our program live from the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences on the State of Things from North Carolina Public Radio, a broadcast service of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Please stay with us. This is the State of Things, and we're live from the Museum of Natural Sciences in downtown Raleigh. I'm Frank Stasio, and the band you heard just as we ended our last segment was the Mint Julep Jazz Band. They're here, and we're going to talk with them a little bit later on. You'll hear their music, and of course they're playing a fundraiser tomorrow night in Durham. We'll talk all about that. We're live streaming this, so if you go to our website, stateofthings.org, you can see the museum's live stream of this program. And what we're going to be talking about is science, which is, of course, a discipline grounded in facts. Scientists are trained to carefully analyze and assess information in objective ways. The world of politics is not nearly as objective. Opinions vary widely, and assessments of the facts are not entirely objective. But the policies developed in the political realm influence scientific research, and of course, science influences politics. So what happens when science and politics collide? How do public policies shape scientific developments, and how do scientists respond? Joining us now is a panel of people to discover and consider the intersection of science and public policy. Emlyn Koster is the director of the Museum of Natural Sciences here in Raleigh, North Carolina's Natural Sciences Museum. Emlyn, welcome back. Good to have you back.
Thank you very much, Frank.
And thank you for allowing us to be in this space. It's wonderful. Terry Lomax, Vice Chancellor of the Office of Research, Innovation, and Economic Development at NC State. Terry Lomax, welcome. Good to have you.
Great to be here, Frank.
And welcoming back Scott Hewler, a Raleigh-based writer who blogs for Scientific American. Always good to see you, Scott.
Glad to be here, Frank.
Emlyn Koster, let's talk about this because the museum has made other headlines. There was the discovery of a dinosaur and also the headlines this week, the departure of Meg Lohman, director of the Nature Research Center. Her move comes after the governor redesignated some museum positions as non-exempt, and that means they're going to serve at the will of the governor. And so some critics of the move to non-exempt positions say it makes employees vulnerable to the shifting political tides and require them to sort of answer to the governor. Talk about that, I think 9 positions here in the museum were shifted from what would have been considered more or less civil service kind of positions to at will, meaning if the governor doesn't like what you're doing, you're gone.
6 positions, Frank, were added in early August to the one that I already held that was exempt. But I would like to pull apart some of the things you connected respectfully in your question. And I will quickly just take you back 3 years ago when this incredible institution was underway with planning for the Nature Research Center, which would ask and answer the question, how do we know what we know, which had been the focus of the 2000 building. Part of the innovation in that planning was that we would enter into a new era, a new style of relationships with universities, and 6 joint appointments would be created, 4 with NC State, 1 with NC Central, and 1 with Appalachian State University. And this was a very innovative thing to do because mostly museums had adjunct positions, not joint appointed positions of the type that you've just had a marvelous example of with Dr. Lindsay Zanno, who is a research professor in biological sciences and also a lead in our lab upstairs. So Meg was one of those 6, and the unit that was called the Nature Research Center, when I came here as the new director earlier this year, and as widely discussed with the boards and the government, it was felt that there was going to be a need to try to amalgamate, unify what had been the separate unit left over from the capital campaign, the NRC, the Nature Research Center, into alignment with the whole. And so I took that move back in May and June. And then I discussed with Meg Lohman, as has been documented elsewhere in the news coverage, that her role would be best parlayed into being not an NRC-specific role, but into a museum-wide role in which she would become senior scientist and director of academic partnerships and global initiatives. And so that's the position from which she's recently decided, and we're very excited for her to become the Chief of Science and Sustainability at the California Academy of Sciences.
So there's an administrative decision to make that kind of a change. It changes her position. She decides to move on to a different job. That's one thing. Then there's this larger question that may or may not be related to that particular administrative decision. Then that is the question of what happens when scientists are beholden to essentially political office holders.
Well, there is no connection, just to be clear, Frank. And so, for example, Betsy Bennett, my predecessor of 22 years, went in and out of exemption several times. And the level of exempt positions in the public service has also risen and fallen over the years. It tends to change with administrations. I've been in exempt-type positions, and many of the other museums at the state level across the United States are also have a mixed bag of classifications with their managerial positions. The fact is that the mission of the museum prevails, that good science is good science, and in no way has the thinking or the action of this museum been in any way modified by us being included to the tune of 6 positions in this recent move by the government.
Well, there was other news this week about the museum. Scott Hewler, you recently wrote a blog post about a film that the museum elected not to screen. Tell us about that.
Well, the people in New York were making a film called, what's the title of the film? You have it there, I should think.
ShoredUp.
ShoredUp. About the effects of rising sea levels on development, coastal development, and more than 100 million Americans live near the coast, and they were using, as they began developing the film, North Carolina as their sort of, as the gallant to the goofus of New Jersey, where they harden the shore and they put in the groins and they do all that kind of stuff. And granted, we do plenty of crazy things here. We replenish the sand, and we rebuild roads where nature plainly doesn't want there to be roads. But overall, the Outer Banks are the wonderful playground that they are because they're natural, because they have been allowed to remain natural, and they move when nature says they need to move. While they were creating the film, while they were working on ShoredUp, we had the whole sea level controversy of last year, sea level rise, where the legislature was taking all kinds of absolutely insane measures to prevent people from planning for and measuring sea level rise. And that became a big
issue. And just to tell
issue.
you objectively, what they actually did was to say that you may not take sea level rise into account when making development decisions. That was the actual fact of what they did, but go ahead.
Right. And so North Carolina, they began looking at North Carolina in a very different way and very much more closely. And I haven't seen the documentary, of course. It hasn't come here yet. And then what happened this week was the museum decided not to show the documentary here. And I wrote in Scientific American that I didn't understand that decision.
Well, maybe you can explain that for us. The filmmakers came to you and they said, would you show it at the museum? And there's a protocol, a process that it goes through, and you made the decision. So maybe walk us through the process briefly. What happens when somebody comes to you and says, will you show my film at your museum?
We have a cross-functional program committee which meets almost weekly to review the latest next batch of decisions about what will be the speakers and the subjects across time in such places as the Daily Planet. The cafe on Thursday evening, which last night dealt with climate change and forest fires, for example. And so this committee had an unusual request, because it's not often that we get proposition to show a 60-minute film by an organization with which we worked with before, I should say, to have that as a way of dealing with clearly a very complex, science-based, but also intertwined with society and environment issues. And so the committee was of the view that this wasn't the best way in which to deal with an issue with which the museum already deals, by the way. We have extensive coverage here in our exhibits and programs on matters of climate change and sea level and the shifting of the barrier islands and what happens over geologic history with sea level going up and down and so on. So I was asked to render my opinion. I saw the film, which is extensively about New Jersey, as was just explained, and I lived through Hurricane Sandy or Superstorm Sandy. And I've had a history of dealing with the frontier of thinking in the museum field about how to deal with what sometimes the museum field calls hot topics or controversial or contemporary issues. It was, in fact, myself and the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture that brought to New York a symposium in 2009 to mark the 400th anniversary of Henry Hudson arriving in the harbor to bring attention to the very things that happened in Hurricane Sandy. And I brought Islamic Science Rediscovered to the museum right opposite Ground Zero when we reopened the Science Center where I was. My point I'm making is that this institution has had, is having, and will continue to have an extensive embrace of all things that relate to the intersection of nature and humans. After all, humans live in floodplains, they live in earthquake zones, they live on the flanks of volcanoes, they live on coasts which are subject to storms and to sea level rise. We're dealing with all these issues through exhibitions and programs. And I'm also adding, if I may, Frank, that I was brought to this position because of my rich history in dealing with these very issues in the Science Center field.
So with this history and the fact that the museum does have exhibits that clearly show global climate change is for real, that the rising ocean levels are a serious problem, all that is here. What was it about this film that you thought was inappropriate for this particular museum? I mean, why not screen this film? What was the decision?
Because a 60-minute film followed by a Q&A is firstly doesn't fit the mold of what we generally do on a science cafe on a Thursday evening here, where there is an interaction between our MC and the scientist over usually 20 minutes or half an hour, and the program is all done by an hour. Showing somebody else's view as opposed to interviewing somebody ourselves, which is what we do weekly, those are very different methodologies. And a museum that is this sophisticated has, in fact, a very diversified toolkit for dealing appropriately with issues. And so I'm on record in the media this week in talking about us wanting to bring about a robust methodology to deal much more proactively with any of these issues where science intersects with matters of societal innovation and environmental stewardship. This is not to be interpreted as some sort of signal that the museum has not, is not, and will not deal with these issues, Frank.
Terry Lomax, let me ask you have an interesting position at NC State, Vice Chancellor of the Office of Research, Innovation, and Economic Development at NC State. So it sounds like all of those things come together, and when it comes to economic development and science, that's where we can really see politics and science mixing. Tell us a little bit about your role and how you sort of manage this question of how to do the research sort of in the face of politics.
Well, I think to describe the role is we do everything from research development, so finding the opportunities for our faculty to go over that match their talents, to helping them go out and get the grants and manage them once they're there, all of that, but also how to translate that out, whether it be by publishing their results or by helping with a exhibit at a museum, or if it's by starting a company or licensing the technology out, whatever it takes to get it out. Our role as a public university is to make sure that happens, and in the best cases that results in economic development. So that's the final part of the continuum that works out so great.
And so the question always is kind of what's in the driver's seat, because we understand that basic research sometimes doesn't have necessarily an end. I mean, you talk about Lindsay was walking around in Utah and tripped over, the bones. Now, like she has an eye for this
right,
sort of
I think
thing.
she's trained to do that.
She's very well trained and knows what she's looking at. But the idea that you're going to be looking for you don't know what and then find it is the stuff of basic research, but when you try to apply it, it can narrow the scope. I mean, do you run into that kind of...
Absolutely, because that's very much in our DNA, so to speak, at NC State, because we are a land-grant university with a public mission to apply what we're doing. So we are doing the fundamental research, but also applying it and making sure that it gets out so that the public can utilize it. So you're always having all different things pulling at you or pushing at you in different directions. And what we try to do is remain the source of the discovery, but also the source of balanced information about that we can put out and to reflect all aspects of different issues and cover as much of it as we can.
But it gets tricky in a film like the one we're talking about today. You have, I mean, the question is, should federal and state dollars be used to shore up our coastlines at public expense or not? Now, the technology involved in that could be the stuff of NC State. How do we do it? Let's go to NC State, talk to researchers about ways that we can build up and keep people there. And the thrust of this movie, and I have to say it had a direct kind of policy point of view beyond the science. It took a point of view that this is a very bad idea, and you heard Scott call it insane. I mean, so it is sided in terms of the outcome. What do you do as a researcher when you're asked to research something with a very serious political edge? To shore up or not is a political question.
That's the core of being a researcher, is to do it with the unpolitical point of view. You're just going in there and it's just the facts, ma'am. I mean, you're going after what is the truth about whatever it is that you're working on. And it's also getting a variety of different researchers. So it's those civil engineers that are going to study how, if you wanted to protect it, you would do it. But it's also the ecologists and others that are going to tell you what are the impacts of what you're doing. And
so these things can be in parallel. So let me go back to you, Scott Hewler. You heard what Emlyn Koster said about the reasons for rejecting the film. In fact, I think there were a couple of scientists in this film who have also spoken
Indeed.
Here, right?
Dr. Pilkey from Duke and Dr. Riggs from Eastern Carolina State University are past speakers in our Science Cafe, and they're referenced in the film.
And Dr. Pilkey is an outspoken opponent of
coastal development.
Coastal development.
Right.
So Scott, what about that argument that this is just not the appropriate venue? We're not censoring the film. We just don't think we should show it in this format.
I have to say I'm still not clear why this isn't the appropriate venue. This is a statewide science museum. It has conservation as one of its main missions. We have an enormous theater in the other building that you could show it. If Thursday night isn't the right time to do it for Science Cafe, do it Saturday afternoon. Do it, have a special showing Thursday night. You know what, we have a 2-hour Science Cafe for you so that we're going to have an hour-long discussion afterwards. It seems to me that in these times when there is so much political attack on science in this state, and I don't mean political dispute of opinion on science, I mean political attack on science in this state, I think that the museum saying, we're just not going to show this, somebody else can do that, is the museum missing an opportunity to defend its position and to help inform. Its job is to get the science out there, get the opinions out there, get the word out. This is an opportunity for the museum to help get the word out by what sounds like a perfectly legitimate filmmaker.
Scott, as you may have read in this week's coverage, the State Aquarium at Fort Fisher showed this film, but it's important to know that that was part of a film festival. And what I said in an earlier interview this week on the record is that the toolkit of a natural sciences museum is not the same toolkit as an aquarium, and we were not putting this film into a film festival. We will be doing film festivals, and we're partnering, as will be the nature of announcements in a few months, incredibly with some of the top producers of film festivals about nature. So there's an abundance of resources out there, and this was simply one offering that came from the Coastal Federation, whose mission I have been on record as greatly respecting. But we made the decision, and I didn't actually make a decision differently than that of the program committee, who had viewed this film and felt that it wasn't the right thing at the right time to deal in a nuanced way with such a complicated issue.
What about, is there a place for a film like this, even one that takes a point of view in terms of policy, and then back it up with a panel so that the public can be invited in for a discussion with people on both sides, having seen, in this case, a provocative film?
Perhaps. I think I'd also want to emphasize that any discourse, and I think that's what NC State is doing, is the discourse has to be civil. And I have also said this week that one of the tools that is available to have these kinds of discussions constructively and in a civil way is to bring about a protocol called the triple bottom line, that there is no sustainable solution to any of these issues like coastal development and sea level change or violent weather unless we bring to the table at the same time, to hear each other deeply and earnestly, the people, planet, and profit sides of an issue. Science is at the core of that issue and has to drive the ultimate knowledge, but it also has to find synergy, as is the case, for example, at the Oregon Inlet. I was just down visiting the Coastal Studies Institute of UNC last week and was profoundly moved by the example of an inlet that was created by a hurricane more than a century ago, for which now there's a delicate community balance, and I met with all of the stakeholders, people, planet, and profit, to arrive at a sensible and rational decision, which they seem to be moving towards in order to co-manage the movement of sand along the beach, the need for that inlet to remain open to shipping traffic and yachting traffic, and at the same time putting sound science and coastal engineering into it.
I want to thank all of you. I'm out of time, but I want to thank all of you. Emlyn Koster is the director of the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Scott Hewler, a Raleigh-based writer who blogs for Scientific American. Terry Lomax, Vice Chancellor of the Office of Research, Innovation, and Economic Development at NC State. Thank all of you for being on the program.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.
Coming up, the Mint Julep Jazz Band. We'll hear about them and a wonderful fundraiser they're going to do, and we'll hear their music right now. Stay with us. This is The State of Things. I'm Frank Stasio. We're live today from the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. We're live streaming. Go to our website, stateofthings.org, if you want to watch this show. And there's a lot to watch now because I'm about to introduce you to the Mint Julep Jazz Band. It's a big swing band. They have been together for quite a while. The Mint Julep Jazz Band recreates the sound of jazz clubs from the 20s through the 40s. This year voted the best musical artist in Durham magazine. Congratulations. And their followers aren't just local, though. They have a vast majority of their support that comes from the global swing dance community. They're going to be playing tomorrow night, 7 o'clock at the Cookery in Durham. It's a fundraiser and a rent party, in fact, for a group called Housing for New Hope. It's a rent party that helps that group, which is involved in aid for people who are homeless. The Mint Julep Jazz Band features Laura Winley on vocals, Lucian Cobb on the trombone, Keenan McKenzie on tenor, Aaron Hill on alto, Paul Rogers on trumpet, Ben Lassiter on guitar, Jason Foreman on bass, and Aaron Tucker on the drums. The Mint Julep Jazz Band, welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
And congratulations on that award. So tell us about this now. Laura, you've been swing dancing for about 15 years, right? Traveled all over the country, is that right?
That's correct. I started swing dancing when I was in high school, and it just sort of grew from this very small hobby into something that I would say is a little bit more than a hobby at this point, now that I am co-running a band. But I DJ, and I have traveled all over the United States and competed, and I still do all of these things.
And how did the band come together?
Well, it's a bit of necessity, actually, because we had been playing together, some of us, in another group, and that kind of stalled out. But people still love to hear Laura sing and hear the rest of us play. So we were getting contacted saying, could you put something together? Could you do something? We had to think about it and say, well, can we?
Or do we want to?
Right. So we tried it out, and it seems to have worked well so far.
Sounds very good. Could you do a song for us?
Sure.
Undecided, that is the story of one girl and two boys, one girl and two boys. She thought both were awfully cute, the boy in the tux and the boy in the khaki suit. One girl and two boys, one girl and two boys. Which one should she give the boot? The boy in the tux or the one in the khaki suit? She asked her father, and she asked her mother. She asked her sister, and she asked her brother. They said you can't sit and wait, one of them must get the gate. So it's one girl and two boys, one girl and two boys. When they both came to propose, the guy in the khaki suit is the one she chose. Tux felt blue, so he went and joined up too. And now she's wacky 'cause they're both in khaki. So what can a poor girl do? She's back where she sat, her lonely tin room flat. Undecided, undecided. That's the story, the sad, sad story of one girl and two boys.
One girl, two boys, the Mint Julep Jazz Band. They're going to be playing tomorrow night at the Cookery in Durham. It's a fundraiser for Housing for New Hope, a rent party, in fact. Wow, what a great song. That's amazing.
Thank you.
That's a really one. And that song, One Girl, Two Boys, right, featured in the famous 1943 film Swing Fever, is that
Swing
right?
Fever, and it was written, and the film starred Kay Kaiser, who is a native North Carolinian and longtime Chapel Hill resident.
Yeah, Kay Kaiser, big band leader in that era, right?
Absolutely. And one other reason we chose this, other than the North Carolina connection, is it's also, this particular film has a very famous swing dance scene that's done to this song and features some very famous dancers. So it's when we play this at dances, it's instantly recognizable and everyone knows the clip.
Well, and your version of this song was featured in the film that won the Jazz Dance Film Festival, is that right? Am I right
That's
about that?
correct. Seattle has a Jazz Dance Film Fest every year, and Jennifer Lee, a Seattle dancer, put together a film and used this song essentially as the storyline and soundtrack to her film.
Do you try, when you recreate these songs, you try to be very faithful to a particular version of them? How much do you allow yourself to improvise? And
It depends. For this particular tune, you know, being in the film, everyone kind of knows it. They know it when they hear it. So we want to make sure that people can make that connection. But other tunes, you know, we try to put our own spin on things as much as we can, for sure.
will you do that right now?
Sure.
Mint Julep Jazz Band, they're going to be at the Cookery in Durham for a rent party. It's a fundraiser for Housing for New Hope. They're here with us live. By the way, we're live streaming, so if you want to watch this show, because we are at the the Museum of Natural Sciences in Raleigh, live streaming, stateofthings.org is the place to watch. Mint Julep Jazz Band is the group you're about to hear.
Swing with that rhythmic sway, and Mr. Sun will warm your bones all day. Get it Southern style. If you like cornbread that no one can beat, chicken pie that tastes like a candied sweet, and you lick your chops every time you eat. Get it Southern style. If you like pale moon shining on the fields below, the bales of cotton pile row on row, it's steamboats on the delta make your heart melt to shout. Oh Mississippi, draw me closer, where every girl's a pretty melody, every skyscraper's just a tree, and serve the best in hospitality. Get it Southern style. Get it Southern style. shining on the fields below. The bales of cotton piled row on row. At steamboats on the delta, make your heart a melt to shout. Oh, Mississippi, draw me closer, where every girl's a pretty melody. Every skyscraper's just a tree, and serve the best in hospitality. Get it Southern style. Get it Southern style.
The Mint Julep Jazz Band live here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. If you want to find out how to get to their fundraiser tomorrow and get tickets to their fundraiser in Durham, you can go to our website, stateofthings.org. There is also a link for the live stream of this so you can watch the show. Another great song. Laura, tell us about this. It's one thing to be dancing to this music. When did you start singing this music?
Well, it kind of, other than in the shower, you know, like, I DJ this music, and so I'm very intimately in love with this music. And so I started singing the summer after law school. I went to one of Luke's rehearsals, and I was just hanging out, and they were auditioning vocalists for this band, and they said, "Hey, Laura, can you just come up and sing this so we know where it falls in the chart?" And I guess I did better than the vocalists who auditioned, and I got the job. So that's how I started singing jazz.
That song that we just heard, Lucian, maybe this is a question that you can answer, because I understand that song, Get It Southern Style, is actually a lesser-known Duke Ellington song.
It is. It is an Ellington tune, and it's one that you don't hear very often. And as soon as I heard it, and I said, that's one that we've definitely got to do. We have a lot of Ellington tunes in the book, and because I'm a big fan. And like I said, when we heard that one, I knew it was one we had to do.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to play Miami Boulevard next, and you can tell us a little bit about it, because this is an original tune.
This is the only original tune on our CD that we just released recently, and it was written by our tenor player, Mr. Keenan McKenzie. We'll play it for you now.
Let's go. Mint Julep Jazz Band, a song called Miami Boulevard. They're going to be playing live at the Cookery tomorrow night. Rent Party, very briefly. Laura, tell us about this Rent Party and a little bit about the fundraiser for Housing for New Hope, right?
Well, Rent Party as a concept began in the 1920s and 30s in Harlem, and it was sort of set up as you hire a band and you have some food and you open up your house and you charge admission, and the idea was that you get enough money, hopefully, to pay the rent for the month. With Housing for New Hope, we sort of translated this into or it's really related to Housing for New Hope's purpose, which is to provide assistance for homeless people, but also to provide rent assistance to people who may be at risk of losing their homes. So the whole purpose of this fundraiser is to raise the rent. And so the funds raised tomorrow at the Cookery will go to all of Housing for New Hope services and essentially helping people pay their rent.
Great plan, great cause, great music, and great venue. Thank you for being on the program.
Thanks so much for having us.
Mint Julep Jazz Band is going to play tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, Cookery, Housing for New Hope's inaugural Rent Party. And that's our program for today. Thanks for listening. This is North Carolina Public Radio. It's a broadcast service of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I'm Frank Stasio. Once again, the Mint Julep Jazz Band.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
You in a taxi, honey, better be ready about 8:30. I mean, don't be late, I'll be there when the band starts playing. Remember when we get there, honey, dance all over the floor, dance all over my shoes. When the band plays the Jelly Roll Blues, say tomorrow night at the Docktown Strutters Ball. You in a push cart, honey, better be ready about 8:30. I mean, don't be late, I'll be there when the band starts playing. Remember when we get there, honey, shim sham, when them all dance all over my shoes.